Sophie sat alone in the small cafe on the corner of Maple Street, the rain tapping steadily against the window, each drop seeming to echo the emptiness she felt inside. The air smelled of fresh coffee and baked pastries, but even that comforting aroma couldn't lift the heaviness in her chest. She had recently ended a long-term relationship, one that had promised stability but delivered heartbreak instead, and the memories of those months together lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup as she stared at the drizzle outside, watching people rush past with umbrellas, their hurried steps a stark contrast to the slow ache she carried. The cafe was quiet except for the soft hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of cups, and Sophie welcomed the solitude, even though it made her feel painfully aware of how alone she really was. She had thought she could distract herself with work, with emails and deadlines, but the fatigue in her body and the ache in her heart refused to be ignored. Just as she was about to pull out her laptop and immerse herself in something that might feel productive, a sudden bump startled her, knocking her coffee slightly to the side, spilling a few drops onto the table. She looked up, surprised, and found herself staring into the warm, apologetic eyes of a man who seemed just as startled as she was. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there," he said, his voice gentle, carrying an easy charm that made her heart skip in a way she hadn't felt in months. He reached out quickly to steady the cup, his hand brushing hers ever so slightly, and Sophie felt a strange, inexplicable warmth spread through her chest. "It's okay," she murmured, trying to calm the sudden rush of thoughts racing through her mind, her voice sounding smaller than she intended. His name was Daniel, he explained as they exchanged polite introductions, and there was something about the way he spoke, calm, considerate, with just the right amount of humor, that made her want to hear more, to know more. At first, the conversation was light, awkward almost, as they laughed over the minor mishap with the coffee and joked about the stubborn drizzle outside. But soon it shifted naturally into deeper topics. Favorite books, childhood memories, small regrets, and fleeting hopes. Sophie found herself sharing thoughts she had never said aloud to anyone recently, and Daniel listened with a patience that felt rare, nodding and responding in ways that made her feel seen, truly seen. For the first time in a long while, time seemed to stretch and bend around them. The rain outside continued unabated, but inside the cafe, hours passed unnoticed as they spoke about life, work, and dreams, their words weaving a quiet intimacy that neither had expected. Sophie noticed little things about Daniel, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his passions, the subtle way he smiled when he found something amusing, and the gentle way he leaned in just slightly when listening, as if every word she spoke mattered more than anything else in the world. When the barista finally called last orders, it felt as though they had been talking for only a few minutes, not hours. As he gathered his things to leave, Daniel hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe I'll see you again." Sophie's heart gave a small, involuntary jump at the words, a mixture of hope and nervousness settling into her chest. She watched him walk out into the rain, the echo of his presence lingering in the quiet corners of the cafe, leaving her with a strange sense of anticipation she hadn't realized she was capable of feeling. She wondered, as she cleaned up the small mess of spilled coffee and gathered her belongings, whether their meeting had been pure chance or something that fate had arranged for a moment when both of them needed connection the most. The thought of it made her cheeks warm and her heart flutter, an unfamiliar yet welcome sensation. That night, as she walked home under a shared umbrella with no one by her side, the memory of Daniel's eyes and the soft timbre of his voice followed her, mingling with the rhythm of raindrops on the pavement and the distant hum of city life. She found herself smiling despite the residual ache of heartbreak, realizing that sometimes life offered unexpected moments that could shift the course of everything, that even on the heaviest of days, chance encounters held the power to remind people of hope, of possibility, of new beginnings. She replayed their conversation in her mind, noticing details she hadn't paid attention to at the time, the slight laugh that escaped Daniel when she mentioned her clumsiness with coffee, the way his eyebrows lifted when he shared something personal about his past, the warmth in his tone that made her feel understood. Each memory seemed to plant a tiny seed of excitement, a quiet thrill of curiosity about what might come next, and Sophie felt a gentle pull in her chest, a mixture of nervousness and longing. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future moment with someone she hadn't known until today, a simple vision of laughter, conversation, and shared silence, and it felt like a small, comforting flame in the dimness of her recent days. She thought about how rare it was to meet someone who could penetrate the walls she had built around her heart so quickly, someone whose presence made the mundane seem brighter, whose voice made the familiar feel new again. That night, lying in bed, Sophie's mind wandered endlessly, tracing every detail of their meeting, every fleeting glance and word, until sleep finally claimed her. But even in dreams, Daniel's face appeared, smiling gently, as if promising that the world might hold more than sorrow, that a single unexpected moment could indeed bring the spark of something entirely new, something neither of them had anticipated but both were already quietly hoping for. And as the city slept under the steady drum of rain, Sophie realized that this was only the beginning of a story that had yet to unfold. A chapter written not with grand gestures but with small tender moments that carried the weight of possibility and the promise of connection, reminding her that even after heartbreak, life still held the potential for joy, laughter, and the soft electric pull of a heart meeting another in perfect unexpected timing. The days after that rainy afternoon passed slowly for Sophie, yet the memory of Daniel stayed with her like a quiet echo she couldn't ignore, filling her thoughts at unexpected moments, making ordinary tasks feel strangely hollow without him. She found herself returning to the cafe, hoping almost unconsciously that he might appear again, and on a Thursday morning, when the sky was still gray but the rain had stopped, she saw him, sitting at a corner table, sketching in a small notebook, completely absorbed yet somehow aware of the world around him. He looked up as she entered, and when their eyes met, a soft, unspoken acknowledgement passed between them, like a secret shared only by those who had felt the pull of something new and delicate. "I thought I might see you," he said, smiling, and Sophie felt her chest tighten in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. They greeted each other awkwardly at first, unsure how much familiarity was appropriate, but as soon as they began talking, the tension melted away. Their conversation started with books and music, moved to memories of childhood adventures, and soon delved into deeper territories. Fears, dreams, the little regrets that shaped their choices. Sophie realized that Daniel had a way of listening that made her want to speak, that made her reveal things she had tucked away even from herself, things she hadn't admitted in months, not since her last heartbreak. As they talked, laughter punctuated their words, small moments of joy that felt rare and precious, like sunbeams breaking through an overcast sky. Daniel shared stories of his own past, moments of failure and loss that had left their mark, but he told them with honesty and lightness, never letting sorrow overshadow the warmth he carried in his presence. Sophie felt a connection that went beyond casual attraction, a sense of recognition, as though she had known him in another life and was only now rediscovering him. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The cafe began to fill with afternoon patrons, the clatter of cups and low conversations forming a comforting background to their bubble of intimacy. They spoke about hopes for the future, not grand ambitions necessarily, but the small things that mattered. Travel they longed for, quiet nights with books and music, the people they wanted to become. Sophie felt herself drawn to the authenticity in Daniel, the way he didn't rush to impress but simply existed fully in the moment, making her feel safe enough to do the same. As the sun began to dip, spilling warm light across the wooden floor, Daniel offered to walk her home, and Sophie felt a thrill mixed with a quiet nervousness, the kind that accompanies something meaningful yet untested. The streets were empty, wet from the earlier rain, reflecting the city lights like scattered jewels, and they walked side by side, talking about anything and everything, the rhythm of their footsteps mirroring the gentle pulse of connection that had begun to take root between them. Sophie noticed how natural it felt to be near him, the way small touches, an accidental brush of hands, the adjustment of a scarf, sent tiny sparks up her arms, subtle yet unmistakable. When they reached her doorstep, neither seemed eager to break the spell of proximity, the quiet night wrapping around them as if to grant them a private world of their own. Daniel lingered a moment longer than necessary, his gaze steady, and said softly, "I don't want this to be the last time we meet." And in that brief, tender confession, Sophie felt hope bloom and fear twist together in her chest, the possibility of something real igniting a warmth that had been absent for far too long. That night, Sophie replayed every detail of the day, the way Daniel's laughter had sounded when he teased her gently about her clumsiness, the curve of his smile when he talked about things he loved, the sincerity in his eyes that seemed to say he was present not just physically, but emotionally, truly seeing her in a way that felt rare and precious. She realized that for the first time in months, perhaps years, She had allowed herself to imagine a life colored with new possibility, one in which she could trust again, could hope again, could open her heart without fear of immediate rejection or disappointment. Even in the quiet of her apartment, the soft hum of city life outside her window couldn't compete with the vividness of the memory, and as she lay in bed, Sophie traced the contours of the day in her mind, noting the small moments, the words, the gestures, the way their conversation flowed so easily, like a gentle river that had suddenly found its course after months of stagnation. She felt a tender pull in her chest, a longing for more, an excitement tinged with caution, the kind that makes one both eager and wary of what the next encounter might bring. Daniel, she thought, was more than a fleeting distraction. He carried a warmth that seeped into the crevices of her heart, a lightness that didn't erase the pain she had endured, but softened it, reminded her that life was capable of surprising turns, that even after heartbreak, a single unexpected connection could awaken feelings she thought were long dormant. The following days were filled with quiet anticipation, a delicate dance of thought and memory, each one of Sophie's routines punctuated by the wonder of what might happen the next time she saw him. She found herself noticing details in the city that she hadn't before, the way sunlight reflected on puddles after rain, the scent of fresh pastries wafting from other cafes, the laughter of strangers walking by, and attributing a subtle, almost secret joy to these ordinary moments, as if Daniel's presence or even the memory of it had painted the world in warmer hues. When they met again, Sophie felt the same thrill, but with a growing sense of comfort, of trust forming alongside attraction, a bond that was delicate yet strong, rooted in honest conversation and the genuine care that flowed between them effortlessly. Their days together began to feel like chapters in a story written by chance yet guided by an invisible hand, each moment layered with emotion. The quiet, easy laughter over shared jokes, the unspoken understanding and lingering glances, the shared silence that was never uncomfortable, but full of meaning, a mutual acknowledgement of the connection slowly taking shape. Even small gestures, Daniel noticing her favorite drink and ordering it without asking, Sophie recalling a detail about his sketches and commenting on it, built a sense of intimacy that neither had forced, but which grew naturally, quietly, persistently. Sophie realized that the ache of her previous heartbreak was fading, replaced by a gentle warmth, a cautious hope that allowed her to dream again, to imagine a life where joy could coexist with vulnerability, and where trust might slowly return, not with grand gestures or declarations, but through steady, consistent presence. As the sun set one evening, casting long shadows across the streets, they walked together once more, the city alive with lights and sounds, yet it felt as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them, their conversation and laughter carrying them along like a soft, invisible current. Sophie noticed the subtle ways Daniel had changed the rhythm of her days. She smiled more easily, noticed beauty in ordinary things, and carried a quiet anticipation for the next shared moment, no longer burdened solely by the past. And yet, even as their bond strengthened, Sophie felt the delicate tension of the unknown, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, knowing that while this connection was precious, life was unpredictable, and every meaningful relationship carried its own risks. But the thrill of discovery, the intimacy born of honest conversation and shared laughter, made her willing to embrace the vulnerability, to step gently into the possibility of something new, something transformative. By the time their walk ended, with the city lights shimmering in the puddles beneath their feet and the night air carrying the faint scent of rain, Sophie understood that this was more than chance. It was a beginning, fragile yet real, a connection that had taken root unexpectedly and now demanded attention, care, and courage to nurture. And as Daniel paused at her door, his gaze soft but unwavering, he whispered, almost as if testing the waters, "I hope this is just the start." And Sophie's heart, long accustomed to caution, beat faster in response, full of hope, curiosity, and the undeniable thrill of something real and profoundly new entering her life, proving that even in ordinary days, even in the quietest rain-soaked corners of a city, one unexpected moment could ripple outward, changing everything and opening the door to a story yet to be fully written, a story she and Daniel would now create together, moment by tender moment, word by word, heartbeat by heartbeat. Weeks passed, and Sophie and Daniel's connection deepened in ways neither had expected, their bond growing steadily through small shared moments, quiet conversations, and the kind of laughter that eased old wounds, creating a rhythm in their lives that was both comforting and thrilling. Every meeting felt like discovering a secret world where they could be completely themselves without judgment or pretense. And the city around them faded into the background whenever they were together. Mornings often began with subtle messages, short notes, or texts that made Sophie smile before her feet even touched the floor. Each one a gentle reminder that someone cared enough to think of her. Their afternoons were spent wandering through familiar streets, talking about everything from favorite childhood memories to their most private dreams, sometimes pausing to watch the sunlight dance through tree leaves, or to hear the faint hum of the city, their hands brushing occasionally, sending tiny sparks through Sophie's chest. Sophie realized that Daniel's presence had begun to occupy not only her days but also her thoughts when they were apart. She replayed moments in her mind, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the subtle warmth in his voice, the way he seemed genuinely interested in every word she spoke, and how safe she felt opening up to him. Daniel, too, found himself anticipating her company, cherishing the way Sophie's eyes lit up when she talked about things she loved, noticing the quiet strength in her demeanor, and being drawn to the vulnerability she allowed only in his presence. One evening, as they walked along the river, the water reflecting the fading gold of the sun, a comfortable silence settled over them, filled not with awkwardness but with understanding, the kind that only grows when two people truly listen to each other. Daniel suddenly stopped, turning to face Sophie with a seriousness she hadn't seen before, and took her hand in both of his touch firm yet gentle. "I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice steady but soft, carrying a weight that made Sophie's heart skip. She felt a rush of anticipation mixed with nervousness, aware that this moment might change everything between them. Daniel continued, "I've never felt this way about someone in a long time, and I can't ignore it anymore. Sophie, I like you. More than I thought I could." Sophie's chest tightened, emotions swirling, joy, fear, hope, and longing all at once. She had guarded her heart for so long, but hearing him speak the truth so sincerely broke through the walls she had built, and she realized that she felt the same way. "I like you too," she admitted in a soft whisper, almost afraid her own voice might shatter the fragile magic of the moment. They stood there, hand in hand, staring at the flowing river, feeling as if the world had slowed around them, their hearts beating in tandem with an unspoken understanding that something significant was beginning. Yet even in that tender moment, Sophie sensed a flicker of hesitation in Daniel, a shadow of concern that made her pulse quicken with worry. He looked away briefly, his brow furrowing just enough to hint at unspoken thoughts. "There's something I need to tell you tomorrow," he murmured, his voice trailing like a whisper against the gentle lapping of the water, leaving Sophie suspended between excitement and unease. That night she lay awake, replaying every detail of their walk, every word, every glance, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. She thought about how rare it was to meet someone who could make her feel both safe and exhilarated at the same time. Someone whose presence could lift her from lingering sadness while also stirring emotions she had carefully tucked away. Sophie realized that her feelings for Daniel were growing faster than she had expected, stronger than she had allowed herself to admit, and she wondered if he felt the same intensity, or if the admission of his own emotions had opened a door to vulnerability he was unsure he could navigate. The next day, when Daniel appeared at her apartment door unexpectedly with a small bouquet of wildflowers, Sophie felt a mix of relief and curiosity, the kind that comes from not knowing exactly what will unfold next but trusting that it will be meaningful. "I couldn't wait another day to see you," he said, smiling, and Sophie's heart melted at the simple gesture, recognizing in it the honesty and care that had drawn her to him from the start. They sat together on the small couch in her living room, the flowers between them like a silent witness to their growing intimacy, and Daniel confessed that he had recently received news that his work would require him to relocate temporarily to another city. Sophie felt a pang of fear and sadness at the thought of distance, but she saw determination in his eyes, a commitment to not let circumstances dictate the fate of their connection. "We can figure this out," he continued, his voice unwavering. "I don't want distance to take away what we've found. You're worth it." Sophie's chest swelled with emotion as she realized that love, real love, wasn't about perfect timing. It was about courage, about choosing each other even when life presented obstacles, about embracing vulnerability in the hope that it could lead to something lasting. Over the following weeks, they navigated the challenges together, sending messages throughout the day, sharing calls late into the night, and planning visits whenever possible. each interaction reinforcing the trust and affection that had begun to blossom naturally. Sophie noticed how Daniel's presence, physical or virtual, could turn ordinary moments into memories she cherished. A simple text reminding her to drink water, a shared song that evoked laughter, a call that lasted hours with no topic too trivial to discuss. Their relationship was growing in layers, not rushed, not forced but steady, each day building on the last, the foundation rooted in honesty, attention, and a deep appreciation for the other's soul. Sophie found herself smiling more, carrying a lightness in her steps, noticing beauty in small things she had overlooked before, and embracing vulnerability with Daniel because she trusted him implicitly, and because the connection they shared made her want to believe in love again. Daniel, in turn, found that his days were brighter knowing Sophie existed, that her laughter lingered long after their meetings, and that the warmth of her presence encouraged him to share his own dreams and fears without hesitation. Each encounter carried a mixture of tenderness and intensity, quiet moments punctuated by the electricity of shared attraction, mutual respect, and emotional intimacy. Sophie realized that the love that was growing between them was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but about small, consistent actions that conveyed care, understanding, and devotion in subtle yet meaningful ways. Even as their bond strengthened, Sophie and Daniel both understood the fragility of beginnings, that relationships required trust, patience, and openness, and they were willing to take the risk, to step into the uncertainty because the rewards, the laughter, the warmth, the shared silences, were worth it. One evening, as they strolled under the canopy of trees lining the river, Sophie felt a quiet thrill of anticipation at the mere thought of the hours ahead, the comfort of Daniel's hand brushing hers, the soft rhythm of conversation blending with the natural sounds of the city. They paused at a small bridge, looking at the reflection of lights in the rippling water, and Daniel turned to her with a seriousness that made her heart flutter. "I know there are challenges ahead, things I haven't fully explained yet," he said, "but I want to face them with you if you'll let me." Sophie felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling that had grown between them so quickly yet so naturally. "I want that too," she whispered, knowing in her heart that love sometimes required bravery more than perfection, and that the courage to embrace uncertainty could lead to moments more profound than she had ever imagined. They stood there for a long while, hand in hand, staring at the flowing water, feeling the gravity of what had begun but also the exhilarating freedom of the possibilities ahead. In that moment, Sophie understood that connection, real connection, was not about rushing, but about showing up fully, honestly, and vulnerably, and that the unexpected bond she shared with Daniel was already transforming her world in subtle yet irreversible ways. As night settled over the city, the stars faintly visible through the gaps in the clouds, Sophie felt a quiet, steady heartbeat of hope, excitement, and longing, knowing that what had started as a chance encounter had blossomed into something tender, profound, and worth nurturing, a love that could withstand distance, uncertainty, and the weight of their pasts, because it was built on authenticity, attention, and the courage to open their hearts fully to each other. And though Daniel had hinted at a truth yet to come, Sophie trusted that the bond they shared could carry them through any obstacle, that the fragile, beautiful beginning they had found together would continue to grow, blossom, and shape their lives in ways neither had yet imagined, proving that even amidst fear, uncertainty, and the lingering pain of heartbreak, love had the power to arrive unexpectedly, to change everything, and to create a new beginning that neither of them could have foreseen but both were ready to embrace with open hearts. The next morning, Sophie woke with a mixture of excitement and nerves, her thoughts drifting immediately to Daniel and the words he had hinted at the night before, the uncertainty lingering like a soft weight on her chest, a mixture of hope and apprehension that made her heart race as she wondered what he might reveal. She busied herself with small tasks around her apartment, arranging flowers, tidying up, and brewing a fresh pot of coffee, but nothing could fully occupy her mind. Every clink of a cup, every rustle of the rain-streaked curtains reminded her of him, his voice, and the way he had made her feel alive again, as though the world held possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine for months. Hours later, there was a knock at the door, and Sophie's heart leapt as she opened it to find Daniel standing there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, his smile warm, apologetic, and slightly nervous, a combination that made her chest ache with both relief and anticipation. "I couldn't wait another day to see you," he said softly, stepping closer and offering the flowers, which Sophie accepted with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the gesture more than the delicate blooms themselves. He stepped inside and they sat together on her small couch, the quiet of the morning wrapping around them like a protective blanket, giving the moment an intimacy that was at once comforting and thrilling. Daniel took a deep breath and began to explain the news that had been troubling him. A temporary relocation for work that would take him to another city. A challenge that had appeared suddenly in his life and left him uncertain about how to navigate it while preserving the connection they had so carefully built. Sophie felt a rush of anxiety at the thought of distance, the fear of losing the closeness they had found threatening to overshadow the warmth of the moment, but she looked into his eyes and saw not fear but determination, the kind that spoke of commitment, of someone willing to fight for what mattered, and a surge of hope replaced her worry. "We can figure this out," Daniel said, taking her hand in his, the sincerity in his voice filling her with a sense of trust she hadn't felt in months. "I don't want distance to take away what we've found. You're worth it." Sophie's chest swelled with emotion, and she realized that love wasn't about timing, perfection, or convenience. It was about courage, about choosing someone wholeheartedly even when life presented unexpected challenges, about embracing uncertainty because the connection they shared was worth protecting. Over the next few weeks, they navigated the distance with patience, understanding, and creativity, sharing messages, calls, and video chats that allowed them to maintain the intimacy they had built, each interaction a thread weaving them closer together despite the physical miles between them. Sophie noticed how even small gestures, a message to remind her to eat, a shared photo of a place Daniel had visited, a song sent to make her smile, carried the weight of affection and thoughtfulness, reinforcing the bond that had begun in the quiet moments of a rainy cafe. Daniel, too, found that the thought of Sophie brightened his days, that her laughter, her kindness, and her curiosity about the world inspired him to open himself more fully than he had in a long time, to embrace vulnerability and hope alongside her. Their connection was a mixture of tenderness and excitement, quiet conversations filled with honesty, moments of playfulness and laughter, and a growing awareness that they were building something meaningful and lasting, even in the face of challenges that might have caused others to falter. Sophie felt her heart expanding with each interaction, a mixture of longing, joy, and a careful, cautious optimism, realizing that love could grow even in unconventional circumstances, that it could adapt, thrive, and flourish when nurtured with attention, communication, and commitment. She allowed herself to imagine future moments together, shared meals, walks in parks bathed in autumn sunlight, quiet evenings with music and conversation, without fear of being hurt, because the foundation they had created was solid enough to carry them through uncertainty, strong enough to withstand temporary separation. One evening during a video call, they laughed over a shared memory from the cafe where they had first met, the memory vivid and warm, reinforcing the bond that had begun with a single, chance encounter, and Sophie felt a surge of gratitude that life could offer such moments, small yet powerful enough to change the course of a person's heart. Daniel's sincerity, patience, and attentiveness reinforced Sophie's belief that love was not about grand gestures alone but about consistent presence, emotional availability, and shared experiences, and she marveled at how effortlessly he had integrated into the contours of her life without demanding anything but honesty, respect, and care. As days turned into weeks, they found ways to bridge the distance, planning visits whenever possible, coordinating schedules, and cherishing the rare hours spent in each other's presence, each meeting a celebration of connection, affection, and trust. Sophie realized that life had gifted her an unexpected beginning, a story that had started in the most ordinary way, a chance encounter in a rainy cafe, and had blossomed into something extraordinary, fragile yet resilient, delicate yet unbreakable in the moments that mattered most. She noticed how her heart had healed gradually, how laughter returned to her voice, and how her thoughts were no longer clouded by the pain of past heartbreak, but illuminated by hope, curiosity, and the thrill of emotional intimacy. Daniel's commitment to navigating the challenges alongside her reassured her that love could endure, could be nurtured even across distance, and that trust and vulnerability were not weaknesses but pathways to deeper connection, creating a bond that felt both tender and unshakable. One afternoon, when Daniel finally returned for a visit, Sophie ran to meet him at the station, her heart pounding with anticipation, and they embraced, the hours apart melting away in an instant, replaced by the warmth, laughter, and familiarity of shared affection. They spent the day walking through familiar streets, talking endlessly, laughing at small jokes and pausing at quiet moments, savoring the presence of one another. Each second a reminder that the connection they shared was real, meaningful, and worth every effort to preserve. Sophie felt a surge of emotion, realizing that this journey, beginning with a spilled coffee, a shared conversation, and the courage to be honest about feelings, had led them to a place of profound understanding, love, and mutual respect, a place where vulnerability was celebrated, not feared, and where emotional intimacy created a foundation for lasting affection. They sat by the river that evening, watching the sunset reflect on the water, and Sophie felt a deep, steady calm mixed with the excitement of possibility, knowing that this was a beginning unlike any other, shaped by chance, honesty, and the willingness to embrace life fully together. Daniel reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, and whispered, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I want you in it." And Sophie, overwhelmed by emotion, leaned into him, feeling that the uncertainties of life no longer mattered, that together they could navigate whatever came their way, that love, once unexpected, had become their anchor and their inspiration. In the quiet glow of the evening, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the city, Sophie understood that life's most profound moments often arrived without warning, that a single unexpected encounter could ripple outward, transforming hearts, lives, and futures, and that by embracing courage, vulnerability, and connection, two people could create something beautiful, enduring, and deeply meaningful. They stayed there for hours, talking, laughing, sharing dreams, and simply existing in the comfort of each other's presence, realizing that while life would continue to present challenges, they had discovered a bond capable of withstanding distance, time, and uncertainty, a love born from a simple, unexpected moment and nurtured through honesty, patience, and tenderness. Sophie knew that every heartbeat, every glance, every touch carried the weight of this new beginning, the promise of a shared journey filled with discovery, intimacy, and joy, and she smiled, feeling a profound gratitude for the ordinary moment that had brought them together, a reminder that life's most beautiful stories often began quietly, unexpectedly, and transformed everything in ways that no one could anticipate but everyone could cherish. As night settled over the city, the stars glimmering faintly through the clouds, Sophie and Daniel sat side by side, hands intertwined, hearts full of hope, their laughter and whispers mingling with the gentle hum of life around them, knowing that this story, started with a rainy day, a spilled coffee, and a chance encounter, had grown into a love that was tender, real, and endlessly promising, a love that would continue to unfold, moment by moment, day by day, as they embraced the new beginning they had found together, aware that sometimes life's most extraordinary gifts came in the quietest, simplest ways, reminding them that hope, connection, and love could arrive unexpectedly and change everything forever.